The cold has returned, so wrap yourselves in blankets and settle in for a long, dark and chilling night. Prepare to explore the hidden terrors of a festive tradition turned sinister. On a bitterly cold December night, I set off for a secluded weekend getaway in a small house nestled on the outskirts of a remote country town. The journey there was marked by a heavy snowfall that blanketed the landscape, transforming the world outside my car into a blur of white. As I approached the little inn where I planned to stay, the snow seemed to intensify, swirling around my car like a frosty cloak. The inn was an old, charming place, a bit worn, but with a rustic appeal. There was no one at the reception when I arrived, just a note saying, "Pay when you leave." I settled into my room, which was basic but clean and cozy. The feeling of solitude was tangible, and the quietness of the inn was both comforting and eerie. I curled up in bed, listening to the howl of the wind outside, feeling a mixture of peace and isolation. However, that night, my sense of tranquility was shattered. I woke up to a strange noise outside my window. At first, I thought it was just the wind, or maybe an animal, but it persisted. Peeking through the curtains, I saw something unsettling, a shadowy figure roaming around the inn's perimeter. The next morning, I found strange scratches on my car window. They looked deliberate, like someone or something had marked my car. This discovery sent a shiver down my spine, but I tried to brush off the uneasy feeling. The second night was even more restless. Again, I was woken up by noises outside. This time, my window bore the same mysterious scratches I had seen on my car. The realization dawned on me that these might be markings used by drifters to target places for robbery. My heart pounded with fear as I recalled stories of travelers being robbed in such remote areas. I couldn't shake off the feeling of being watched and targeted. As soon as dawn broke, I packed my bags and left the inn without a second thought. As I drove away from the town, the sense of relief was overwhelming. The whole experience at the inn and the town had turned my quiet retreat into a harrowing adventure. The mystery of the shadowy figure and the scratches remained unsolved, but the encounter left me more cautious and aware of the risks of traveling alone. Driving away from the town, I couldn't help but constantly check my rearview mirror, half expecting to see that shadowy figure following me. The fear I felt was palpable, making every mile feel like an eternity. The usually calming countryside now seemed to hide unknown dangers in every shadow. As I drove, my mind replayed the events of the past 2 nights. The thought of someone lurking around, marking my car and the inn's window for some sinister purpose, was deeply unsettling. I realized how vulnerable I had been, alone in a remote place, with no one to turn to if things had gone wrong. I stopped at a small diner along the way, seeking some human contact and a sense of normalcy. The warm light and chatter inside were a stark contrast to the cold and silent inn. While there, I shared my experience with a friendly waitress. She listened intently, her eyes widening with concern. She mentioned hearing similar stories from other travelers, adding to my anxiety. The rest of the drive was tense, with every creak of my car and gust of wind making me jump. I was constantly on alert, watching for any signs of danger. The comforting familiarity of my own city was a sight for sore eyes as I finally arrived home. Back in my own bed, the fear and tension slowly began to dissipate, but the experience stayed with me. I lay awake, thinking about the inn, the scratches, and what could have been. The encounter had taught me a valuable lesson about the unpredictability of travel and the importance of being cautious, especially when alone. The mystery of the inn and the shadowy figure remained unsolved, and perhaps it was better that way. Some things, I realized, are best left unknown. My weekend getaway had turned into a chilling reminder of the unexpected turns life can take, leaving me with a newfound respect for the unknown and a story I would not soon forget. When I arrived in Venezuela, I was excited to learn about their Christmas traditions. People were looking forward to Nochebuena, the special night of Christmas Eve. This was when families and friends came together to celebrate. Caracas was buzzing with excitement for Christmas. The streets were full of people looking forward to the holiday. I walked among the locals who were out celebrating Nochebuena. The mood was very festive. Families and friends were skating on roller skates. They moved happily through streets and plazas that were decorated with lights and colors. You could hear their laughter all around, filling the cool night air with joy. I visited Caracas for a special reason. I had heard about a unique Christmas tradition there. People skate on roller skates to church at midnight. This sounded like a great mix of fun and celebration, and I wanted to experience it myself. When I got there, it was just as wonderful as I had imagined. The streets were filled with bright lights and many colors. The air was filled with the delicious smell of Venezuelan Christmas food. It was sweet and made me feel welcome. But even with all the lights and happy sounds, I saw something strange. There were odd symbols on the walls of old buildings. They looked like very old drawings and were roughly made, maybe with charcoal or something dark. The pictures were of weird shapes. They were not like animals or people, but had twisty lines around them, like thorny vines. These symbols gave off a spooky feeling, very different from the fun around me. Standing there looking at them, I could smell something old and musty in the air. This made them feel even more mysterious. The symbols seemed like they had old secrets. They made me think of stories about hidden fears and things people shouldn't do. I wanted to know more about these symbols, so I started asking people around. Their answers were different and kind of worrying. Some people just said they were normal drawings on the wall, but others looked nervous and spoke quietly. An old man told me, "You shouldn't think too much about these things." He looked at the symbol and then looked away fast. As the night went on, I kept feeling that there was something more to these symbols than just street art. They seemed to mean something deeper and darker, like there was a story no one had told. The happy sounds of the city started to feel distant. I was getting more and more interested in finding out about these old symbols. On the next day, I decided to explore Caracas more. As I wandered through its streets, those eerie symbols seemed to be everywhere. They appeared unexpectedly on corners and in alleyways. The bright daylight did little to ease the discomfort they made me feel. That evening, with the city alive in festive celebration, a tragic incident shattered the joy. A young skater, full of life and laughter just moments before, suddenly lost control. He crashed hard against a wall that had one of those symbols. Sadly, he didn't make it. The shock and horror among the people were intense, turning the festive mood into fear and confusion. As police closed off the scene, I couldn't help but notice the symbol on the wall where the accident happened. It was exactly like the ones I'd seen before. A cold shiver ran through me. I wondered if this was just an unlucky accident or something more linked to the symbol. 2 nights later, the city faced another sorrowful event. A young woman, a skater too, was found lifeless. Not far from where the first tragedy occurred, she lay beneath a building marked by the same symbol. The similarity was too much to ignore. Now these symbols seemed more than just drawings. They felt like they were bringing death. The atmosphere in Caracas changed. People began to whisper about a curse tied to these symbols. They hung over the city like dark shadows. I started having restless nights filled with nightmares where shadowy figures roamed the streets. Wanting to truly understand Caracas's skating tradition, I had joined in the skating myself. Skating through the streets, I felt nervous at every turn, especially when I passed those symbols. They seemed to be watching, making me question my safety. This Christmas in Caracas turned into the most frightening experience I'd ever had. Leaving the city, the joy and excitement of the season were overshadowed by the fear and mystery surrounding those symbols. The cheerful sounds of skating that once filled the air were now replaced with the haunting silence of a curse that seemed to linger in the festive atmosphere. On a very cold night in December, I decided to stay by myself in a little house right outside the city. This house was surrounded by a big, open area, far away from all the noise and busy life of the city. I made myself comfy next to the fireplace with a book. The sounds of the fire crackling and the wind howling outside made the house feel cozy, but also kind of alone. As I read more and more of my book, I started to hear a weird noise. At first, I thought it was just in my head, but the noise kept going and got louder. I started to get curious, even though I was a bit scared at first. I walked over to the window and looked out into the snowy field. Peeking through the foggy window, I saw a dark shape moving around in the snow and wind. It looked like it was searching for something. The way it moved was odd, sometimes fast, sometimes slow, but it seemed to have a reason. I could see it appear and then disappear, and each time it came back it made me more curious and a bit scared. The next morning, I saw footprints outside in the snow. They were all over the place and didn't go in any direction. I thought about following them, but decided to stay, safe in seed. I tried to forget about what I saw the night before, thinking it was just something strange. But when it got dark again, I started to feel scared. I heard the same noises, but they were louder and closer this time. Then at the middle of the night, I woke up to a bunch of knocks on the front door. The knocks were slow and sounded on purpose. They were so loud in the quiet house, and they made me feel really scared. I just lay in bed, too scared to go see. I kept thinking about the dark shape I saw before and wondered if it was now right outside my door. I was too scared to check and just stayed in bed, listening to the wind and the noises the old house made. The knocking stopped after a while, but I still felt scared. The next day, I was worried all day. I kept looking out the windows, but didn't see anything. The footprints in the snow seemed to remind me of how scared I was the night before. That night, I got even more scared. The noises outside started again, but they sounded like they needed something. Then came the knocking on the door, louder and more forceful than before. I was so scared, thinking of all the things it could be, but I couldn't move. As the night went on, the same thing happened again. But this time, the dark shape seemed to be closer to my house, almost like it could touch the walls. Every knock sounded like it was shaking the house. I couldn't sleep or relax, just kept thinking about the dark shape and what it wanted. Then suddenly the knocking stopped. I stayed near the fireplace all night, too scared to sleep. The dark shape and the knocking made my quiet weekend scary and unsettling. When I left the house the next day, I still didn't know what was going on. The dark shape and the knocking were just scary memories of a weekend that was supposed to be quiet, but turned out to be very different. During the Christmas holidays, I decided to make some extra money by delivering food for Uber Eats. One chilly evening, I received an order to pick up food from McDonald's and deliver it to a remote area on the outskirts of the city. Despite the heavy snowfall and cold weather, I accepted the order, eager to earn some extra cash. As I drove toward the destination, the streets became increasingly deserted, and the houses grew fewer and farther between. The atmosphere felt eerily quiet, almost as if the snow was muffling the world around me. Finally, I arrived at a run-down house that looked barely habitable, with dim lighting and a sense of neglect. I approached the front door with a McDonald's bag in hand, only to find a notice indicating the house was abandoned. A sense of unease crept over me, but before I could turn to leave, I heard a noise from behind. Turning around, I saw a man in tattered clothes approaching from the side of the house. His sudden appearance in such a desolate place set my nerves on edge. He didn't speak, merely extending his hand for the food. As I handed it over, preparing to make a quick exit, I noticed his nails, long, uncut and filthy. It was a disturbing sight that sent a shiver down my spine, but before I could react, he suddenly reached out to grab me. Instinctively, I jerked back and sprinted to my car. As I fumbled with the keys, I could hear him following me. Glancing back, I saw the man still pursuing me, his figure looming in the snow. My heart raced as I started the car and sped away, leaving the eerie scene behind. I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see him chasing me down the road. The fear I felt was overwhelming. My hands trembled on the steering wheel, and my thoughts were a whirlwind of panic and disbelief. Once back in the city, I parked and took a few deep breaths to calm myself. The experience had been terrifying, a stark reminder of the unpredictability and potential dangers of delivering to unknown places. It left me with a deep sense of occasion and a story that I would not forget anytime soon. The rest of my drive home was tense. Every shadow simidominus, and every sound made me jump. The image of the man's dirty, unkempt nails and his desperate attempt to grab me haunted my thoughts. It was a vivid reminder of how quickly a seemingly routine job could turn dangerous. Back home, the warmth and safety of my own space felt more comforting than ever. Yet even in the familiar surroundings, I found it hard to shake off the fear and adrenaline from the night's events. Lying in bed as I replayed the encounter over and over in my mind, each time feeling a chill run down my spine. The next day, I decided to share my experience with a few friends. They were shocked and concerned, urging me to be more cautious on future deliveries, especially to remote locations. Their reactions only amplified my own realization of the risks I had unknowingly taken. For the next few days, I couldn't bring myself to accept any delivery orders. The thought of going back out there, potentially encountering similar situations, was too much to bear. The encounter had left a deep impact on me, changing the way I viewed my side job as an Uber Eats driver. Gradually, as the days passed, the intensity of my fear began to fade, but the caution it instilled in me remained. I became more selective with the orders I accepted, avoiding deliveries to isolated or unfamiliar areas. The experience had taught me the importance of being aware of my surroundings and listening to my instincts. The memory of that night stayed with me, a chilling reminder of the unexpected dangers one can face in the most ordinary circumstances. It was a lesson in vigilance and caution, one that I would carry with me in all my future endeavors, whether in work or life.